Hello and welcome to part 15 of my Japanese for Beginners series. By the end of this video, you will know how to make suggestions to people like, let's do this thing, or would you like to do that thing? This lesson corresponds to pages 92 and 154 of the Genki Volume 1 Japanese textbook, but even if you don't have the textbook, you should still be able to follow along. では始めましょう。Whoa, wait a minute. So, I finally get to teach you guys what my catchphrase means. At the beginning of all of these videos so far in the series, I've always begun with では始めましょう with some varying degrees of creep factor in there. Now, that actually means something. So, では is sort of the polite and also literary-ish, bookish version of saying じゃあ, which some of you might know means, well, okay then. So, it's something that you kind of say like before you're going to say something. And then 始めましょう. That's actually a verb, and it is in the let's do the verb version of the verb, which is what I'm teaching in this video. So the verb in question is hajimeru or hajimemasu. And as you learned a couple videos ago, it is actually one video ago, it is a do verb. But don't worry, for this particular grammar rule, it actually doesn't matter if it is a ru verb or an u verb. The rule is exactly the same. So to make the let's do the version of the verb, you turn it into its polite form. It's masu form, basically. Ru verbs and u verbs all end in masu regardless. And even the irregular verbs end in masu. So we're good. We're all covered. Anyway, you take that masu and you just change it to mashou. And that's how you say let's do this verb. So in hajimeru or hajimemasu, in that case, it's hajimemashou, which means let's begin. So that's what my catchphrase means. It means, well then, let's begin, or well then, let's get started. So keeping that in mind, let's just show you a few examples of how a regular verb is changed into a let's do this verb. Nemasu, that's a verb that means to sleep. Nemashou would mean let's go to sleep or let's go to bed. 運転します, that's a verb that means to drive, pretty much to drive a car. And if you want to say, hey, let's drive, 運転しましょう. Now here's a little phrase, 顔を洗います. So the verb 洗います is to wash. 顔 is face. So 顔を, that particle を, 洗います is to wash a face. But if you wanted to say, let's wash a face, we're not really specifying whose face it is. It could be my face, it could be your face, it could be her face. We don't know whose face it is, but let's wash a face. 顔を洗いましょう. Here's another little phrase, お茶を飲みます. So 飲みます is a verb that means to drink. お茶 is tea, green tea specifically. So that phrase by itself means like to drink green tea. But if you want to say, hey, let's drink green tea, お茶を飲みましょう. Here's a little phrase using a different particle other than wo. Just to remind you guys, other particles exist. うちへ帰ります. So 帰ります is a verb that means to return, to go home. And then uchi specifically means like home. So うちへ帰ります means to return home, to go home. But if you want to say let's go home, it would be うちへ帰りましょう. So let's take this to the next level. You might remember a few videos back I taught that if you add ka to the end of a sentence, it turns it into a question. So you can do that with mashou. If you add a ka to the end of mashou, you're basically turning it into a shall we do this verb? Or you can also think of it as let's do this verb, question mark. Or you can think of it as let's do this verb, okay, question mark. So for an example, let's look at this one. そのセーターを洗いましょう. So そのセーター means like that sweater related to you, the listener. It's probably your sweater or the one that you are wearing or holding up. を洗いましょう. You might remember from 顔を洗いましょう, like let's wash a face, let's wash your face. So let's wash that sweater related to you, the listener. Let's wash your sweater. But if you add a ka to the end and turn it into そのセーターを洗いましょうか? It's more like, hey, shall we wash that sweater? Shall we get that sweater washed? Hey, let's wash that sweater of yours, okay? So it sort of softens it up. It's not so much a let's do this thing, but it's more like let's do this thing, okay? Like, shall we? You wanna? And let me also note that I'm not necessarily in this scenario suggesting that I specifically am the one that shall wash your sweater. It's a little bit passive. It's more like, hey, let's get that sweater of yours washed. It's why don't we get that sweater of yours washed? It's kind of like when we say it like that in English, that's a way of being a little bit passive. If I say, hey, why don't we wash that sweater of yours? I don't necessarily mean that you and I literally are going to wash it together. I don't necessarily mean that I literally am going to wash that sweater. Maybe I'm going to hand it off to the maid, or maybe it's a passive aggressive way of telling, hey, you wash that sweater. And it's similar nuances with ましょうか. But it's usually just a respectful, sort of like, it softens up the let's. It makes it less like a, let's do this thing and I'm suggesting it, and more like a, hey, let's do this thing, okay? Now there's one more level, one more way of suggesting something to someone. Let's do something. Would you like to do something? This one is more along the lines of, would you like to do something? And it's a little counterintuitive, so bear with me. So you may remember last video, we learned how to do the negative version of verbs. And in this video, for the purposes of this video, we're just looking at polite verbs. So the way you change a polite verb into the negative version of itself, all verbs in their polite form end in mas, regardless of what kind of verb they are. U verb, ru verb, irregular verb, they all end in mas. So you simply just change mas to masen to make it the negative version of itself. And then if you add a ka to the end of that, that makes our next grammar rule. So riddle me this. What do you suppose this means? 学校に行きませんか? So by itself without the ka, 学校に行きません means to not go to school. So you would assume, okay, well, if a ka equals a question mark, then you would assume 学校に行きませんか? You would assume that means you're not going to school. But it actually doesn't mean that. It actually means, would you like to go to school? And that may be kind of counterintuitive, right? You're literally saying not go to school, question mark, but what you're actually asking is, would you like to go to school? So a way that you can think of it that makes it slightly less confusing is if you think of it as, wouldn't you like to go to school? Because then there's that nt in there, that not for the masen. We would say that in English. We'd say, wouldn't you like to go to school? Like, wouldn't that be great? Like, yeah, you could go to school. What a great suggestion. And that's kind of similar to the way it is in Japanese, but yeah, it's definitely counterintuitive if you're a beginner, but just think, if it's masen ka, it's would you like to do this verb. So let's say you want to ask somebody if they'd like to drink some beer with you. You'd say, 一緒にビールを飲みませんか? So 一緒に means like together. ビール is beer. ビールを飲みます would be to drink beer. ビールを飲みません would be to not drink beer. But since it's ませんか, it's wouldn't you like to drink beer 一緒に with me? If you want to ask someone out on a date politely, デートに行きませんか? So date is a date. You're using particle ni because it's showing a goal of movement. You're not at the date, but you're going to go to the date, you hope. So デートに行きます means to go to a date. デートに行きません means to not go to a date. But if you ask someone デートに行きませんか, it's like, wouldn't you like to go on a date? Or would you like to go on a date? And then let's make an even longer sentence here. Let's say if you want to ask someone if they want to eat curry with you in India. インドで一緒にカレーを食べませんか? インドで, so particle で, again, we're noting the location where an activity is going to be taking place. インド is India. 一緒に, again, that together. カレー is curry. So カレーを食べます to eat curry. カレーを食べません to not eat curry. カレーを食べませんか? Wouldn't you like to eat curry? Or would you like to eat curry? 一緒に together with me. インドで in India. So before we review, just a quick plug for my Patreon. I have 2 levels, a $2 level and a $19 level, and it comes with all sorts of perks. Check out the video description, more details down there. では、レビューしましょう. I'm going to say each model sentence once, and I'm going to leave a few seconds in between each sentence. I will then have timestamps and a pinned comment in the comment section below, so it's going to be at the top of the comment section. Also in the video description, I'm also going to have the timestamps, so you can click on those timestamps. It'll have a little time, and it'll jump you to the spot in the video where I say that exact sentence, so you can control your own destiny and practice these phrases, listen to these phrases over and over and over again at your own pace. では、始めましょう。寝ましょう。運転しましょう。顔を洗いましょう。お茶を飲みましょう。家へ帰りましょう。学校に行きませんか？一緒にビールを飲みませんか？デートに行きませんか？インドで一緒にカレーを食べませんか？ Thanks for watching this video, and in the next video in the series, part 16, you'll learn how to say that you either like or dislike something. Thank you to all my wonderful patrons. Support this series and all the other series on this channel. If you feel like this video and the ones in this series are a little too beginner level for you, if you're at the intermediate level, go ahead and check out my Sing Study Japanese series or my Watch Anime and Sailor Moon and Learn Japanese series. Those are for intermediate learners. And until the next episode in this series, mata ne!